Good morning, Pat.
Good morning, Connor.
It might be evening for some people.
It could be.
All right, we're going right in. We're going right in for the meat.
We're going to do a deep dive today.
So we are on chapter 4, right, of this series. We're going through each chapter. Some episodes are covering multiple chapters.
Chapters of what?
Chapters of what? From Broken Boy to Mended Man.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. And the chapter that we're looking at today is chapter 4, right, which is understanding your wounds. And you had like another sentence that you pulled from some of the questions in the back that you thought summarized it well.
Yeah. So, okay. So there are two chapters on this, and the real issue, and maybe we end up titling it this. I don't know, but how do childhood wounds affect us as adults? How do these childhood wounds affect us as adults? A lot of men don't even know why they behave as they behave, why they do what they do. And what we're trying to do is to show men that oftentimes, and a caveat too here, not everything that happens and not everything you do is because of a childhood wound. But if a guy is consistently sad, or maybe consistently angry, or maybe a little bit of both, and confused at the same time, then there's a very good chance that childhood wounds, unresolved childhood wounds, could be at the core of that. And so if a guy is consistently feeling like lashing out, or has a baseline of anger, or maybe a baseline of sadness, then there are these 9 characteristics. So if you were to look up the adult children of alcoholics, you would find they have a list. So I thought we should have a list. So I developed a list of 9 characteristics of broken boys over a few years.
When you say adult children of alcoholics, is that a book?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and they have specific characteristics.
that are repetitive ones. And so not every characteristic all the time, and maybe some other characteristics too that aren't on the list, but these are generally speaking the characteristics that adult children of alcoholics exhibit. And so men with childhood wounds have their own broken boy characteristics that they continue to exhibit. That's what we're going to be delving into here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always want to remind myself every day. In fact, things have become about reminding myself. It's not this idea that, sharing with the world, how to fix these things. I'm like, man, the more I look into these things, I've barely got them fixed at all, right? But it's interesting. The goal of doing this is to kind of snap out of survival mode, right? Because normally what happens is I have these behaviors, they're affecting me, but I don't have time to even think about them or deal with them, right? But if you play that out across 40, 50, 60 years, you're never going to have time to heal. And then you're just never going to have time to accomplish the things that God has put in your heart, apparently. So the whole point of even hearing these, sometimes I hear these 9 characteristics or different types of things like this, and I go, whoa, I didn't know that I was dealing with that. But immediately, as soon as you read it, it connects or something, and you start feeling it. So it's important to hear these things out loud, and these aren't just generalizations. It's interesting how well researched you are on this stuff. Like when I read the book, even last night, I thought I was reading for the podcast this morning. I was like, I'll read to prepare for the podcast, some sort of thought like that. And I was just like, I got hit by something, about forgiveness and about recycling forgiveness, meaning you might have to do it again, and you might have to do it again, and you might have to do it again. And yeah, so hearing these 9 characteristics, it can do something to the soul. And then taking the time to reflect on them can do something to the soul. And then taking the time to write about them can do something to the soul. And so here we go.
So maybe I just give you the list, right? And then we maybe do deep dives on a few. So chapter 4 has got the first 4 of them, an overview on the first 4, and then chapter 5 is the remaining ones. But you have a hard time believing that people really care about you. Erik Erikson's first task of child development is trust versus mistrust, trust versus mistrust. And so, like in my case, apparently I wasn't given the proper amount of care and attention as a child. So I grew up with a lack of trust, a feeling of abandonment, a feeling of abandonment. And more than that, not really feeling like I was the gleam in my parents' eye, feeling like I was very much on my own. So when I walk in the room, still when I walk in the room today, I I don't believe, generally speaking, that people are going to naturally be love me or be or care about me. That's the first one, and I don't mean to spend all this time on each one, but the first one is pretty important.
Yeah, no, this is good.
You just have a hard time believing that people really care about you. And if like me, you had experienced abandonment, and that can be parents in the home, because I had parents in the home, and I had nice parents. They're really great parents. They were doing the best they could, but they weren't giving me the proper cues of love, affection. I wasn't getting, we talked about it before, the right nurturing of love, structure, roots, and wings. I wasn't getting the right cocktail of that. And so net is, I ended up feeling, and so I'm healed. I'm fully alive. It took me decades. My proposition here is that I can help a man do in months what took me decades. And I know that's true because it's already happening. We're getting all this incredible feedback, which is wonderful. But this first characteristic is having a hard time people believing that people really care about me or you.
The whole point is like things happened when we were young that may not have been our parents' fault completely.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes may have definitely been their fault.
Mm-hmm.
But it has produced some sort of effect today.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you can have your parents could have been really nice people and so forth, or they could have been abusive too. A lot of guys that I talk to have had very abusive parents in terms of the words that were spoken to them. I have a friend, Mike. He lives in Singapore, and he was born without a few of his fingers, and on his 16th, and his father always wanted to have a boy who could play football, so the father could live his dream through his son. On his 16th birthday, his father said, "The worst day of my life was the day you were born." I mean, you just, how do you get over that? How do you get by that? Well, he's been able to forgive his father, but boy, I'm telling you, that left a limp. But he's been able to forgive the father, and that's good. But that's a pretty big blow. So you have verbally abusive, you have emotionally neglectful, you have physically neglectful, you have physically abusive, and then you get into even criminal behaviors like sexual abuse and things like that. So there's a full spectrum of things that can happen here, but the net is that if the child doesn't feel like he's living in a safe home for whatever reason, either passivity or aggression, for whatever reason, then the child is not going to feel safe, and this creates distrust of. If you can't trust your parents to provide what you need, how can you trust anyone else?
How can you trust anyone?
And so, number one, you just have a hard time believing that people really care about you.
Well, praise God that there is healing available,
Yeah,
right? I mean, the whole point of this section of the book is that you would take the time to really feel, absorb, and understand. History matters, right? You start reading history, you start understanding where you came from, what happened. America, we fought wars, and then all of a sudden you can feel empowered on the inside that I'm an American.
Mm-hmm.
I can get up and go to work, and it's the craziest little feelings that change you. And so how much more so your personal history? Like when you take time to say, okay, what did happen to me as a kid? How's it affecting me today? It's interesting.
So we started a little late today because you graciously allowed me an extra 30 minutes because I was speaking to a men's group of about 25 guys this morning. And one of the ways I started with them, I said, when we get together, when we get together as a group like this, we are typically talking about where we want to go, the future, what we could do, what we should do, what we ought to do, and these kinds of things, and how we can change. And I've said it on the podcast already, and I'll say it probably many times more because I say it to myself every day. If you're trying to solve the wrong problem, you can only succeed by accident. And so it's really important to not only talk about where we want to end up, but to understand, okay, how did we actually get here? The history thing. And so I can only solve the problems that I know about. So if I'm trying to solve a problem and I don't even understand what the problem is, the chances of likely success are very limited. So
Yeah.
so this is a look back in this part one, like you say. We're trying to unravel what happened to you. Because guys, I mean, if guys can understand what happened to them, then real changes. I've taken to saying this. Have I said it on one of the podcasts? I don't know. But anyway, faith is not a strategy. And many Christians might bristle right away at that. But faith is not a strategy. Look, if you have a flat tire and you just want to pray that God will fix the tire, he could do that. But it's a lot more likely to happen if you get out of the car and get in the trunk and get out the spare or call AAA. And so with childhood wounds, if you're out in the wilderness, another illustration, if you're out in the wilderness and you've been there for 2 weeks and you're out of food and water and you're starving to death and you're about to die of thirst, faith is not a strategy. God could send a miracle, but what you really need at that point is a compass and some good wilderness skills. Yes, or a guide to get you out. And so so with these childhood wounds, you just believing our way out of something that got behaved into is very, very limited. God can do it. Yes, God can do it. But let's not try to believe our way out of a situation that we got behaved into.
Something you really are awakening in me is the importance of practicality.
Practicality, yeah.
The importance, you really hammer on that.
We
And
talk about it all the time.
Yeah, you're not afraid of the Holy Spirit. Like, what a silly thing to say. You're not afraid of miracles. Like, that's not what's being said. What's being said is, hey, we're real humans with real hands, real hearts, real brains. God has given us a list of options of how to deal with these things, a proven biblical process of healing. So the real question is, will you step into it? Not, is it there, or will you just sit around and keep running through the same thought process over and over again? And I don't want to say you, like I'm talking to a bunch of people at home or something. I really need to be saying these things to my own stomach.
Yeah, it's the collective us. Mm-hmm.
And do I have the courage to recognize even what happened this morning and last night, where I'm reading the book again, which I've been asked to do, right? Hey, read the book twice, it might help you more. And I'm reading the book for the second time and I'm going, oh my gosh, I need to start working through these weird feelings that I thought I let go with my ex-girlfriend 5 years ago. I thought they were gone. I felt so good. I started asking some other people out. I felt great about it. Like what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, wow, actually, this thought... Yeah, let me explain this for a moment for some reason. I felt this thought coming in every couple weeks, and I would just push it away. I'm like, oh, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. But then equally, at the same time, not directly connected in any way, also, like, lust was coming up in my life, like a temptation towards lust. And I kept asking God, why is this feeling inside of me? It's like faith is not a strategy, right? So like just sitting around and doing nothing about it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, luckily, God's very merciful, so he'll put practical things into our life, right? And then I started saying, you know what? I forgot. Somehow I wasn't connected to it. This seems so ethereal and distant for people, but it's so real. It's so concrete. I was like, you know what? I'm going to stop avoiding that thought and I'm going to go in. So I laid down on my bed, right? And I was reading the book and I saw the opportunity to catch the thought and go after it. And then I began praying and reflecting, and then I just began, like, honestly tearing up a bit and repenting more. I was like, God, I can't believe I did those things. I'm so sorry. Paul talks about this in Corinthians. He says, what profit did you gain for the things of which you are now ashamed of? Right? And so I'm like going in on that thought. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm more ashamed of that thought than I thought, and God, I need to actually talk about it and like let it go, and I squeezed it out with him, kind of thing. And I was like, you know what? I'm sorry I did those things. I'm sorry I made those choices. It was real. I wasn't just saying it to like try and feel better. I was saying it because of a real relationship with him, that I had wronged, right? God is pouring out mercy and love and perfection on the earth to us, and I chose a different way. Silly. I shouldn't have done that, right? So now it's really good to say, you know what, God, I'm sorry that I did that. And that's where real healing takes place. And I have a worry, Pat, small worry, that our culture and our world doesn't have the time for this, doesn't have the time for healing. It's a real worry of mine.
Well, that's why we're here.
That's why I'm like spending hours and hours focused on this topic. But yeah, we probably should move on to
so
two.
faith is not a strategy, but every strategy can be made better with faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they're not mutually exclusive by any stretch of the imagination. Okay. So, you have a hard time believing that people really care about you.
That was number one.
That's number one. And then number two, you're oversensitive and often misread what people intend. Oh, this is like me in spades. Just, you misread social cues. You overread what's being said, or you actually ignore positive social cues is another way that this can happen.
So your emotions are completely disconnected to what's actually occurring, and then your decisions are wonky as well.
Because you're so unsure of yourself and a lack of confidence. Parents should be, doing things that instill confidence, and sometimes that doesn't happen. And when it doesn't happen, then you end up being unsure of when you don't have the good emotional intelligence, situational awareness. There are many things that that children either get or don't get during the nurturing process. I keep saying this, but love, structure, roots, and wings, that nurturing process. And then when the kid doesn't get it, then gets into a situation as an adult on his own or her own, and then suddenly don't know how to interpret things. And then plus, because maybe they've been neglected and feel the sense of abandonment or whatever the case may be, there is this compounding effect of oversensitivity. Yeah. Okay. Number three?
Before number three, I think this was a screenshot from when I was reading last night.
Yeah.
And it was under number two. As an adult, many people have let you down, not kept their word, not been there for you when you needed them. Many walked away from friendships without saying a word, as though your relationship meant nothing. Unfortunately, that reinforces the nobody loves me, nobody cares narrative. Yeah. In reality, often the perceived negative social cues have nothing to do with you personally. For example, the other person is distracted, struggling with their own crisis, or just too tired to talk. So it's true. I mean, sometimes people are sending you these, hints that you need to be quiet or something like that. Mm-hmm. But your emotional system is so out of whack because of whatever happened to you as a kid, right? That you can't even read it right. So you shouldn't be trying to read it right. It'd be wiser for you to go home and this sounds silly. I'm just listing out something. Go home, clean up your room, make some good food, read this book, and start to reconnect with what's actually going on. The other key thing that I thought you said that was really valuable to me was you don't have confidence in yourself. So that's why you're not reading the room appropriately, is because it's going to sound like a stretch, because you don't feel like you have a safe place to go home to. Mm-hmm. So then you get out in public and you're needing to claw, right, for survival energy, right? Because home's not safe. And when I say home, I'm actually talking about like inside your own heart, inside your own life. So you don't feel safe. So you're trying, I remember this. This is why I'm speaking so,
Yeah.
adamantly about it. I remember going out in public and trying to get energy and love from people, because I was so unconfident, so broken on the inside.
Mhm.
And then it got specific. I was like, wow, I'm scared of beautiful women that I think are living a good life. And I'm scared of Christian businessmen, like, and I was like, these are the particular situations where I really lock up, and I'm tempted to fib and and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need help.
Well, we all need help. Some of that's just normal human relations, right?
Right.
But for broken boys, it's exaggerated.
Right.
Yeah, we're hypersensitive. I could have put I used the word oversensitive. I went back and forth between hypersensitive and misreading what
And you
people
use the
intend,
word over.
but I used the word over.
I think it's much better.
Yeah, I didn't want to be too hyperbolic with it.
Yeah.
So the way I end. So in the book, I've got like a page and a half for each of these. I don't spend a lot of time on developing these things. An entire book could be written on each one of these 9 characteristics. Hundreds of books have already been written on each of these 9 characteristics. What I wanted to do is I wanted to it's called a panegyric. Anyway, I wanted to give a summary of the main kinds of ways that a guy might think or feel.
And our goal is real healing, right?
And
Our goal is not to write a 180-page book on this particular.
Exactly. We're not trying to. So in my dissertation committee for my PhD, and so my dissertation, they were adamant. One of the guys on my dissertation committee in particular was adamant that if you perfectly, he was getting after me because I was spending so much time trying to articulate the problem. He said, if you perfectly, let's just say you perfectly articulate the problem, you still have done nothing to solve it.
Yep.
And so that really had a big impact on me. So less time, let's just understand the problem and then move on. But at the end of each of these 9 things, there's a promise at the end of each of them. So for the one we're talking about right now, in the pages ahead, we'll explore how you can manage this type of oversensitivity. So that's what we're really trying to do. Wow. Yeah. And then there's a reflection exercise too at the end of each one. So to what extent are you oversensitive, often misreading what people intend? And then I'm actually asking guys to if they feel comfortable, do it however they want, but take out a pen or a pencil or highlighter or whatever you use on your digital device. So, and then mark it. Okay, to what extent are you oversensitive, often misreading what people intend? Never, rarely, sometimes, usually, always. And a similar question for each of the 9. So it's a real opportunity for self-understanding here.
Yes, that one makes me laugh. It's like, to what degree are you misreading people? It's like, well, I don't know. That one in particular is it's hard. It's hard to rate.
I get the joke.
Yeah,
I get the joke.
That's good. Okay, so number 3, you showed some interest on this one, right? You are easily angered.
Well, yeah. So I grew up. I mean, I quit high school, extremely angry, frustrated young man, and joined the Army. The Army has this fantastic system that's perfectly designed to produce the finest fighting men in the world. It also has a system that's perfectly designed to knock the chips off the shoulders of prideful young men like myself. And so probably one of the best things that ever happened to me was to go into the Army because, if you're going to get up at 5 a.m. for a 5-mile run in combat boots, you don't say to the drill sergeant, "Oh, I really feel like I need to sleep in this morning." So anyway,
I feel attacked.
But the whole anger thing, and I never have lost my temper at work, and it's fascinating it's axiomatic that men typically will not lose their temper at work, but they will bottle it up and then take it home, and then some little thing that the wife says or the children do triggers, and then they kind of snap. And so now the whole family is walking around on eggshells all the time because they never know what's going to set dad off. The same thing that sets dad off one day, another day he's fine with it. And so you're easily angered. There's an unpredictability to it. There's this kind of rage that's boiling just below the surface. Yeah. So now my promise is that you actually can get this anger under control and have a normal person's anger. Jesus got angry, but he had a normal person's anger. And, a man can get there if he will go through this healing process that we're leading up to.
That's a buzzy word, a normal person's anger.
Yes,
I
it
like
is.
that phrase.
Yeah, well, normal person's anger. So, be self-controlled. It's the fruit of the Spirit. So anger, I mean, Moses threw down the tablets and busted them, had to go get some new ones. I mean, so anger's throughout the Bible. And, David decided that he was going to go kill Nabal because he disrespected David and his men. And if it wasn't for Abigail calming him down, he would have, done a murderous thing. So, anger is just part of the deal. But there's this professor, James Garbadino, and he wrote a book called Lost Boys. I quoted in the book in this section. So young boys who have not been fathered and mothered well, so maybe they're neglected, emotional neglect, maybe it's physical neglect, maybe it's physical abuse, whatever it is, who grow up with this anger boiling inside of them. They learn aggressive behaviors that protect them from being hurt, and so and then also, not to get too deep in the weeds here, but so you see these young men on the highway in urban areas, at least, where they're driving very, very aggressively, risky behavior. I actually had one, I think it was yesterday or the day before. I was driving along and there was a car on the left-hand lane in front of me, and then there was like 20 feet, from the front of my car to the back of their car. And I swear, a guy came weaving through there, going at least 30 or 40 miles an hour faster than we were. I don't even know how he made the gap. I really don't even know how he made the gap. He's a pretty good driver. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, there's so much aggression pent up in this young man. And I wanted to have, I was filled with compassion for him after I got over the initial shock of it. I'd love to sit down with him and just hear his story. Why is he so angry that he feels like he, needs to do all this risky behavior?
Fascinating to look at the root of that, because your opinion on that is pretty objective because you've won a lot of race car races. So for you to think that
with aggression,
yeah,
with aggression.
So yeah, it's interesting to, yeah. My immediate reaction is like, well, how do we know that he's not just being a free spirit and blah blah blah? How do we know that he's not just having a good time as a man? And I begin to think about it, and I'm like, well, whether he thought about it or not, he's putting his life at risk, which is putting his mother's sanity at risk and his father's sanity. So he's not being very loving towards his family. He's not being a responsible, loving man in that regard. He's putting other humans' lives at risk on the road. So that's extremely insulting. There's a list of things. And then, so now we can start to conclude, okay, well, that's not really probably what a healthy man behaves like. A healthy man races on a track. Mm-hmm. I'll say it like this, because this is how I feel on the inside. A healthy man realizes that the sanctity of human life, right, And so they say, wow, but racing is really cool too. So then they go, okay, well, what do I need to do to race safely? Well, I can do it in a parking lot that's empty. I might get a ticket, but hey, that's the cost. It's fine. At least people are safe. Or I can make some money and I can go to a high quality go-kart track where the go-karts race 65, 70 miles per hour. And again, there's a wisdom to now my pursuit of this.
You're making me want to go to the go-kart track.
Good, right? So it's just fascinating to think about that. But it's like, no, I'm going to do it on the highway around all these people. And now you can get to an interesting hidden layer. Maybe this person has hidden aggression, hidden unprocessed pain that is causing them to forget about all these important pieces and then just do what I want the way I want it, when I want it. I think a lot of people don't like being told that there's something wrong with them, right? And we also, as a culture in general, at least this is how my body reacted, we don't like declaring that something you're doing means that you have a problem. So, hey, if you're driving weird in front of on public roads, there's something wrong with you. Like we don't like hearing that. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, if and I know a little bit about this because I've been that guy.
Me too.
So yeah, and I know what's going on inside of me. There's this immensely it's a baseline of anger and it's aggression, and you see this come out. Aggression's good in sports, right? To be competitive, but then you see the player who is losing his cool and doesn't have the ability to keep the anger under control. I wrote in the book after several things, but it's exhausting to be angry all the time. So, this is the point of why we want to heal. It's exhausting to be angry all the time for you, for your family, for everyone who must tiptoe around you. Your anger also contributes to depression. And then again, the promise, my hope is that by the end of the book, you will have discovered why you feel so angry and take the opportunity to do something about it. So Connor, reflection exercise. To what extent are you easily angered? Never, rarely, sometimes, usually, or always. You see? Yeah, that's number 3.
Oh, man. This podcast is us going through the book again live on air is doing things. It's doing things inside. Man, yeah. When you said that sentence right there, you said, I know what it felt like when I was driving aggressively.
Right.
It brought it up in me too. I was like, wow. There was almost never once where I was driving aggressively on the highway. I'll just be honest, like hitting 130, 140, whatever, right? Weaving in 20-foot gaps, not losing my life. Praise God. Oh my gosh. Wrecked 2 vehicles though when I was young. I'm 31 now, but when I was younger, I wrecked 2 vehicles. What was I feeling on the inside? It was always like I wanted to prove something.
Yeah.
Like I was
sometimes
special.
Sometimes it's a feeling of invincibility, and there's a lot of that in the pride piece of it too. But for most of the time, there's this core of anger or rage. It's kind of a boiling cauldron just below the surface.
So weird.
Just looking for something to set it off.
Yeah, fascinating.
And then how do I know that? And then so somebody cuts in front of me, and then that's a trigger for my anger. So
it happened. I had a nice little moment with God. Who knew that road rage would bring so much, to the surface? Obviously, but this guy flew by the other day, and proving something, competition, something, right? Because you just mentioned competition too. He flew by maybe like 95, 100 on my left. And I noticed the way he made a gap, and I was like, that was sloppy. Like, I could do better. And immediately what came into my body was like, I'm gonna race this guy and beat him. And I didn't do it, praise God. I was just like, but then this other real feeling, this is the real healing process, right? Like this other feeling came across me of, man, I don't even know my wife in the future yet, but I love her, And I was like, and I know who God wants me to be. I know who God calls me to be. I could like feel it in my heart. And I was like, you know what? It's pleasing to my soul, Proverbs, right? Then knowledge will be pleasing in your soul, right? And it was pleasing to my soul. It washed the anger. It just like it made it easy. I didn't have to compete with some random guy. What a silly thing. I need to compete. I need to prove my worth and risk my life for all my friends and everyone around me. I need to go put that at risk so that I can feel accomplished in this next 2-minute period of beating this guy to exit 77. It's like crazy. No way.
Down where you live, I remember 10 or 15 years ago, there was a teenage athlete, and he was out in his parents' car. It was a Mercedes, and had some other boys in the car, and took a turn too fast at about 130 miles an hour, and the wheels came off, the tires came off the wheels and flipped, and he survived, but he basically is a vegetable, not a vegetable, but severely handicapped as a result of that. And I don't remember what happened to the other boys, but so I shouldn't speak to that. But yeah,
It's not uncommon across the country.
yeah. So the verse in Timothy, when we're talking about the strategy and everything, it comes to mind. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And so when we have emotions, like if we are easily angered, or if we really have a hard time believing that other people care about us, or if we are oversensitive and often misread what other people intend, then this is giving us some good information, and God can help us in the healing process if we'll use the tools that He's made available. So He's given us a sound mind. He hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And so let's use the sound mind and actually do something about these things. Because as I've said before, if you're thinking about how you are now, and 5 years from now, what's going to be different if you don't actually use the sound mind God is giving you now to actually do something about these particular issues as you become aware of them. And so we're
Come on.
bubbling up some stuff here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but these are the problems. We're not talking about the solutions yet. Gosh, I guess I'm kind of getting anxious to get to the solutions, but okay, let's make sure we understand the problems correctly first. So yeah, and then the fourth one we'll talk about today is, you're not sure what healthy male behavior looks like.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is that talking about the problems produces the reflection that already begins the solutions. So being patient enough to that is why people write 180-page books on a particular issue.
Right.
Is because it does relate to the solution. Humans are actually pretty solution-minded creatures. People don't like suffering. So they're trying to figure it out, right?
So I had a very awkward start into manhood, high school dropout, joined the Army, talked about that before. I was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division. This story's in the book. I was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division, and I rose to the rank of specialist 4 in the minimum amount of time. So very disciplined. I love discipline. I've really responded well to the discipline. I needed discipline. I needed boundaries. I needed structure. I didn't have any structure growing up. I loved the structure. And so I just P1, PFC 1, 3, and then specialist 4, minimum amount of time. And then I was eligible to be an E5, a sergeant. And my master sergeant didn't promote me. So I went to him, I said, have I done something wrong? And why haven't you promoted me? What do I need to do to get promoted? And I started bugging him basically almost every day. And finally he sat me down and he said, Pat, the more you bug me about getting promoted, the less it makes me want to do it. So I would advise you to just back off and not keep pushing me on this. So my situational awareness was zero. I just had not been trained. My emotional intelligence was not what it should be. And so I backed off, and then it was a matter of a month later, he promoted me to sergeant. But just a very awkward start into manhood because I did not understand what healthy male behavior looks like. Why? Well, my dad was abandoned by his father when my dad was 2 years of age, the youngest of four children. So my dad grew up without a dad. So he never felt the scratch of his father's whiskers. He never heard the soothing voice of his dad reading him a bedtime story. He never tossed a ball in the backyard, never had his hair tousled, never wrestled with his dad on the living room floor, never heard a truck door closing in the driveway at the end of the day, signaling that his father was about to re-enter the family orbit. And so he was basically left to guess at how to be a father to me and my three younger brothers. I think he did the best that he could. We became part of a church that really didn't have a plan to help him be a godly man, husband, and father. That's another story for another day. Because I do feel like the church is culpable for... We de-churched when I was in the 10th grade.
It's funny, the church is coming up in my heart too.
Yeah, and we de-churched in the 10th grade. I think that's part of the quit high school story. But anyway, so my dad, I think he did the best he could. And so I'm thankful for my dad. At least he stayed in the picture, you see. His dad just abandoned the family. My dad did the best he could. It didn't work out for him with the way his four boys turned out in the end. But at least, so his legacy, I said this at his funeral, I said, my dad's I said, the legacy of some men is measured by how far they go. My dad's legacy is measured more by how far he came. Yeah.
Where he came from.
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah, it's funny. Something came up in my heart with the church and having a book at home and being willing to sign up and do the work. And there's something going on where your sergeant, it was your sergeant, right?
Master Sergeant, yep.
In the world, I mean, there's a verse on this, right? The sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than the sons of God. Ugh! Well, plain English, they're out here doing it right. And they know how to deal with each other. And you guys don't even know how to deal with each other. You don't even know how to love each other or treat each other right. Like, God's given us everything. But we at church still can't correct someone beautifully and firmly. Hey, Pat, I don't really want to promote you when you keep bugging me. And then that did something to you. You snapped in. You said, you know what? You could feel the weight, right? It's not always about the words. You could feel like the energetic weight that love and truth in a different form was being given to you. And you were like, okay, I got to heed this out of wisdom, right? You heeded the voice of wisdom. And so the church is culpable in the sense that you might be going to the same church for years and years. And unfortunately, something with the confusion of what Christianity is and how Christianity is always nice. Always be nice. That's what Christianity is. Be nice, right? Well, that means that a grown man might not come along your side and correct you when he sees something that needs to be corrected. And we've talked about this before. For some reason, God's doing this in my heart. Maybe because I believe in love, because I believe in truth. But when I meet a guy who doesn't shake a hand firmly, the first thing I do is I lovingly look him right in the eye. And this is not my system. God wells this up in me every time. But I look him in the eye and say, hey, can I teach you how to do a handshake real quick? And I smile. And he goes, yeah. He's not even that much offended. It's like offense comes up a little bit in him, but then this excitement at the opportunity to be loved and invested in. And then they look me in the eye and they go, yeah, sure. And it's great. And I might have to teach you 3 or 4 times, and it's okay, right? And there was another guy, I think I told you about him, he was speaking too much. And I could tell that he was so wounded. He had a good job. He was getting well paid, but he'd come to church and he was starved for friends. And I just pulled him aside one time and I said, hey, I can tell that you really want to connect with people, but you over talk a lot and you're too excited. And I said, if you just calm down a little bit and listen more, you're going to feel the connection of the conversation. You're going to feel where it's going and you're going to ride it like a wave. It's going to be easy. And
so this is the 31-year-old fathering these younger men. That's incredible.
Oh, praise God,
But the question, of course, is, why weren't they getting these are part of what we call wings, teaching men how to become independent and
Yeah.
how to become part of the world, part of a yeah. I remember too a similar situation. I, we were down at Disney and we were in one of the gift shops, and there's this young man wandering around in there, and I was just so overwhelmed with compassion for him. He literally was wandering around, and he was the word that came to mind was clueless. He didn't have a clue how to do normal things. I don't know what the backstory was because we didn't really engage on that particular day. I was with my family, but I carry the burden of that young man's face around in my mind still. That when way before I ever did anything, I had literally either I think I literally just become a Christian, and I accidentally spilled a mug of coffee into my lap one morning when I was reading my Bible, just starting to read the Bible, and it was painful. And I went into the shower, and I put water on it, and I started wailing. I was wailing, and my wife came. My brand new wife came. Are you all right? All right. What's the matter? Are you all right? I said, well, yeah, I'm fine. And but I can't get these faces out of my mind. I had these faces. I just sea of faces of people, hurting, pain-filled, suffering people. Just it was like a vision of all I could see was just thousands and thousands and thousands of faces of people in pain, broken people hurting, and it was overwhelming to me. And it didn't mean anything to me at the time, but I feel like that was the beginning of the Lord, calling me to, my calling is to take God's message of love to a broken generation. Has been since 1987, a long time. To take God's message of love to a broken generation, and I think that probably goes all the way back to that cup of coffee being spilled in my lap, and God using that to begin to give me the pathos, the feeling the pain of other people. I've always felt the pain of other people. My counselor had a few words to say about that, but it's not uncommon for people. I remember too many stories here, but one quick story. I was a bartender in college, and I noticed something, and that is that the people who had been through the greatest suffering tend to be the people with the most joy. If they don't go the other way and
Oh,
become bitter. And,
or if they don't die.
and so there was this young woman, and she was the most joyous waitress in the place. And so I asked her one day. I said, "Have you been through great suffering?" I don't know why, as a college kid, I would have thought that question of it. I said, "Have you been through great suffering?" And your countenance changed, and she said, "Yes, I have." And she told me a little bit of the details of it. So, but she was a survivor, and she had that resilience. And so, some people, will be resilient and be survivors and so forth. But you could be so much more healthy if you actually also get out of denial and face the truth, getting into the healing part of this, and grieve what could have been and forgive those who need to be forgiven. And we'll get into all that.
Grieve. Hmm.
All the people who prevented you from understanding what normal, healthy male behavior looks like. If you have to guess at normal, healthy male behavior because it's never been exampled, I mean, it's not really your fault, right? It's not your fault.
No.
Yeah. But that
All the
does,
way back to Adam and Eve, right?
but it doesn't mean you can't do anything about it.
Yeah. It's funny. This, there, because of the internet and, some of my opinions on the end times and the internet and now the whole globe can be reached. And, a lot of people have those feelings. But because of the internet, there now is this opportunity for all of us contributed to each other's demise in some way, right? And we don't like you mentioned that in one of your books for sure. We like to paint ourselves as the victim, right? But you also
or the hero,
yeah, or the hero.
but not the villain.
Yeah, but you're not the villain in someone's life. And I really think about it more sometimes. I'm like, wow, I wonder how, even though I was reflecting what my parents were putting into me, I also wonder how when I got really upset and made a conscious decision to fight back in a certain way, when I became the villain in their life too. And like, wow, my son's really dragging me down today. He's beating me up, making me feel terrible because my parents are humans too. And so it's just funny. But what I'm saying with the earth and everything is, yes, we contributed to each other's downfall across the earth. But now there's this opportunity where people are sharing the truth of God with each other. And there's the opportunity for us to contribute to each other's healing, in massive ways, right? It's just amazing.
Across the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, okay.
And then across the table.
Okay, look at me. I'm Pat Morley, right?
Okay.
Okay. Now who am I? I'm the smartest person in the world.
Right.
There's literally...
Because you have the phone.
I know everything there is to know about everything as long as I have this.
The medium is
It's
discipline,
unbelievable.
right?
So what is the purpose of this?
You should see it that way.
Yeah, so the purpose of technology, the ultimate purpose of technology is to help fulfill the Great Commission.
Praise God.
Yeah. So Jesus, his mission is total global conquest.
I always love when you say it.
Yeah, TGC. I mean, the gospel will be preached to the ends of the earth, and then the end will come, and then the Lord will come back. And so, net, the massive, beautiful things that are happening with technology are so incredible. I'm always surprised. I mean, I get it, but I'm still surprised when people talk about the evils of technology, and that's all they talk about. And because technology is not evil, it's not good, it's morally neutral. Technology is morally neutral. It's like a handgun. A handgun in the hand of a criminal is an instrument of evil, but you put it in the hand of a police officer, and it's an instrument of
now you saved
good.
my life. You saved my son's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's the same gun. It's morally neutral, and so technology is really morally neutral. But when you think, if the main thing that's happening in the world at all times is that God, and this, I would stake my life on this, I have. The main thing that's always happening in the world is that God is sovereignly orchestrating all human events, meaning that he either causes or allows things to happen, to bring people into right relationship with him and right relationship with each other. So loving God, loving people. This is the main thing that's going on. And so God has allowed or caused all these technologies to be developed. And now you see the translations of God's word into these strange, small languages, these little dialects that you might only have, a couple of dozen speakers or something like that. It's phenomenal what's going on with technology. So you take TikTok, and lots of controversy about that, but I think, if my personal opinion, if Jesus was alive today, he would be on TikTok, because he would say, okay, this is where people are gathering. I'm looking on people with compassion, because they are harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people out there on TikTok, not all of them, many of the people out there, they need the compassion of Jesus. They need to know that someone loves them. They need to know that God is real, and that and that he wants to have a relationship with them. So if we don't go on TikTok and tell them that, how are they ever going to know? Ha! There you go.
You're funny. Well, that was good. That was a good episode. We got through 4 of the 9 characteristics of... I'm forgetting what they're characteristics of. Characteristics of a broken boy,
Men
right?
who grow up with childhood wounds.
Yeah, men who grow up with childhood wounds. So we got through 4 of them. told a lot of great stories. Some healing occurred. Hopefully, for anyone listening, some healing occurred for you, some curiosity, some prompting. We're quoting a lot of the book. We're going through the book in audio form and conversation form to drive home the concepts, to drive home the depth, and to promote the book to the world, so that people can hear about the book more and more. But if you want to get yourself a copy, head over to patrickmorley.com/book, or you can do the drop-down menu on patrickmorley.com and hit Pat's new book. It's right there, which is very exciting.
Cool. That's very cool. Yeah. Yeah. So I want men to buy this book. I want women to buy this book so they can understand the men in their lives, husbands, fiancés, boyfriends, and maybe even for themselves, maybe for a son, maybe it's for a dad.
20% of our reviews have been like from women.
Have they? I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking about all the emails and the things on Amazon as well. I think it's been about 10-20%.
Yeah, and the thing is that the book is just a means to other ends. The ends is to heal childhood wounds that, if left unhealed, guys are just going to keep repeating the same things over and over and again, and nothing's going to, faith will not change it by itself. Generally speaking, you need a strategy. This is a strategy. So we want this book to get in the hands of men and women so that men and women can heal their childhood wounds, break the cycle, and become devoted or more devoted followers of Jesus. That ultimately what we want to do is point people to Jesus.
Amen.
Yeah, that's
good.
it.
This episode is complete.
10-4. Roger. Over and out.
We'll see you guys in the next one.